And, I think that another thing that L&D people in particular can do is just continue to advertise your interest in getting people from non-traditional backgrounds. You read a lot now about how it needs to be about skills and not credentials. And I really believe that. One of the things that as a small business, it's really important for us is that we not just say we only want people who've worked at other public relations firms, or we only want people who understand how to talk to media. It's great if you come in with that experience, but we have people who work for us who have wonderful transferable skills throughout their career, and now they're doing things at a high level that they never thought they could do.
David, welcome to the Making Better podcast. How are you doing today?
Great, Matt. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. I am really excited to have you on because a little while ago, so what we're going to be talking about today for all the listeners is the Supreme Court's affirmative action decision that came down relatively recently. And I'll admit, like I said at the beginning, talking to you, I didn't immediately connect it to the corporate world, right? I thought college admissions, okay, that's a thing. There's a whole discussion to be had about it, but I didn't immediately connect it to more directly what I do. And then I start listening to podcasts about the decision, and it seems like there's definitely some relevancy there. And so I thought there's really some great space for a discussion of how do we think this is going to impact corporate learning and development, DE&I functions. What can we be doing to, what should we be adjusting, the kind of how we operate within organizations?
Yes.
So that's kind of set the frame of the discussion.
Cool.
But before we get to that, I'd love to hear from you. So what's your background, kind of, how did you arrive at doing stuff kind of in the DEI space?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so communications is everything for us at Rudd Resources, and that means that when we are approached about supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at a corporate level, we look at that in terms of how do you communicate what you're doing, your commitment to it, how important it is to the mission of your organization or your company. So typically what we will do is just that, consult from the standpoint of messaging, what are the channels, who are the people who need to talk about corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion within your organization. And we've done that for, Fortune 500 companies. We've done it for smaller organizations. We did a lot, a few years ago in the aftermath of the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor tragedies, when people were just not sure what to say about their mission. They wanted to make sure that they were seen as good corporate citizens. They wanted to make sure that they held on to their employees. And oftentimes we were asked to give our advice and counsel on how to express all of those good intentions and plans. So that's sort of how we come to it, is making sure that people feel comfortable communicating their mission and their values when it comes to DE&I.
That's awesome. And I think that's one of the reasons that I was excited to have you on about this, is because you've interacted with so many different organizations.
Yeah.
Through this kind of lens of talking to lots of different teams that are practicing. So you've probably seen a lot of different stuff. So could you give us a quick lay of the land of, I think most people have probably seen, they know there was a Supreme Court decision about affirmative action. But what was it? What happened?
Sure. So just by way of a quick overview. So in Students for Fair Admissions versus President and Fellows of Harvard College, both of Harvard College and the University of North Carolina, the Supreme Court struck down race-conscious admissions at colleges and universities. So I'll repeat that. They struck down race-conscious admissions at colleges and universities. But what people should understand, or many things people should understand just factually before we even get into the reaction to the judgment, is that employers can still lawfully implement diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility programs that are seeking to ensure workers of all backgrounds are afforded equal opportunity in the workplace. So there's nothing that says you should no longer, you got vulnerability, you can't do this legally in the workforce when it comes to ensuring equal opportunity. So that's one of the key things to know if you are, in a company or you're thinking about learning and development programs for your employees.
I think that's a big one, because I know, just like everything in today's world, everybody wants to take it to the extreme. Yep. And I know there were some there were some organizations on certain extremes that were saying, DEI is now illegal, and it clearly is not.
Right.
Fairness is never going to be equal,
Right.
or it's never going to be illegal.
That's right.
And so I think from our perspective, there is with all things in the Supreme Court, there's a very specific thing that they're ruling on.
That's right.
And then everything else, until it is at some point, now many other things could be brought in front of the court with this as a precedent, but until that precedent is applied, it doesn't mean it does anything other than the ruling. So I think that's always a really important take.
That is the key. I think that's one of the key observations, Matt, is that we are now in a period of great legal ambiguity. What will it mean for hiring practices and recruitment and retention practices? What will it mean for how you address matters of diversity from all angles, LGBTQ plus, racial, gender, all of it, faith-based diversity, all of it's, one of the things there are many things that we know about diversity, but one thing is that it has many dimensions that all need to be respected. And we just don't know exactly what this could mean. But to your point, there are advocates on one side of the spectrum that are eager to say this means that all DE&I programs are done and it's a wrap, and they are eager to come after hiring programs and are eager to go after some of the better, some of the most well-known global brands that we know, and attack them on their diversity, equity, inclusion programs. And we'll get into it, but I think that what you'll hear me say a few times in this conversation is that those organizations simply need to be focused on the future. And the future and trends continue to show us the workforce is becoming more diverse. Talent comes in all packages. In any organization that's approaching this from the standpoint of fear, I have to protect a position lest I get sued, I think is automatically and already sort of on the wrong side of the argument, is probably doomed to fail in some way.
I mean, that's just a great point to foot stomp right there, of just like, if any time you're making corporate decisions from a point of fear,
Right.
or from a point of defense versus from a point of like engagement and embracing and wanting to do the right thing, bring in the best people, there's clearly a right way to kind of set those policies.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we'll get into all of this, but study after study, and I know that you're into this as well. Study after study has shown that companies that are intentional and determined about diversity, equity, inclusion simply do better. It's not just a social right thing to do; it's financially the right thing to do. When you look at their returns on investment, when you look at their cash flow, obviously, when you look at innovation, I think we've seen for years now the benefits from a bottom line perspective of diversity. So I just couldn't understand why a company would want to run from that, especially when you look at your future marketplace and your future workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely some studies we can link to
Yeah.
in the show notes for
Yep.
that. So outside of that, just like, since so much of this is, as you said, kind of a point of ambiguity or a moment of ambiguity, are you having discussions where people, like, what are people seeing of kind of the direction that this is going? Are there initial implications that people are expecting in their workplaces and regards to programs that it's going to affect, or decisions from executive leadership that they're making differently? Or are you hearing anything in the discussions that you're having?
Well, one thing that fortunately I'm not hearing is this retrenchment and this fear that we talk about.
Right.
I think that's probably in large part, Matt, because of the company that we keep. The company that we keep will include organizations and companies that will remain very
Yeah.
serious about their commitment. I'm just today learned of a client, one of the Fortune 500 clients that we've had, that wants to move forward on a conference that advances diversity, and the conference is focused on leadership within the ranks of its Black and Latinx employees. So, really gratified to hear that. But what I can speak to is what I read, and I definitely read that people are concerned about an assault on their programs. They're concerned that we will retreat back to a position of compliance as when it comes to diversity and equity inclusion. I think when you talk about um, the trajectory of DE&I programs at companies. In the past, it typically starts with compliance. We simply have to do what the law
Yeah.
requires and mandates that we do. And then it graduates into, well, we want to do this because it's the right thing to do, because we want to be seen as a good corporate neighbor. We want to be seen, we want to have good CSR reports. And then it graduates to, we recognize, as I was saying a minute ago, the value that DE&I has with regards to how we make money and how we innovate. So I think that there are concerns that we will retreat back to that compliance position. And I've read that, I've read that people are concerned about, lawsuits, and they're going to come. Let's be real about that. Those lawsuits are going to come, no question about it. But I think that um, I tend to lean on the side of, let's not be too concerned about compliance. Let's take this as it comes. As you said, one ruling about college admissions does not beget automatically a string of actions that should be taken at a company, and certainly within its learning and development programs.
Yeah. And, as you were talking about those kind of different levels, one thing that also struck me is when you think about what the case was about, it was much more feeling about that compliance realm of,
Yes.
like, check boxes and numbers
Hmm.
and quotas, and that tends to be what people think of when they think of affirmative action, right or wrong. That's often what comes to mind. And when you think of broader diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, that's the most
Yeah,
basic beginning point you should be at
that's
anyway.
right.
If that's all you're doing with your program, then you're just getting, there's so much more richness of what it takes to create. You can do a lot of work creating an inclusive culture without doing anything around quotas or or
Absolutely.
tracking or anything like that. Yeah, what are those other things that you've seen with some of the teams that seem to work really well?
Well, one thing that I think is really going to be important in the wake of this decision is sort of a focus on allyship, right? So we understand
Mm,
that within companies, you'll have the affinity groups slash ERGs. You'll have programs and systems that are set up to create safe spaces. You'll even have programs that are designed to have special learning and training programs to help employees of color rise through the ranks. And all of that is needs to be accompanied by sponsors and allies. And so I think that what
mm-hmm.
we'll definitely see is a need to promote allyship and companies that are serious about promoting and maintaining talent. And as I said, and I'll always say, talent comes in all packages. So if you are a believer of that, then you will want to make sure that you have a whole network of allies and sponsors who are supporting those African American or women or LGBTQ plus professionals as they try to rise through the ranks at a company. So that allyship is going to really be important, and really incentivizing it. Showing that we take this so seriously that we want our allies to see the benefit to them personally in their careers by really getting behind and supporting and lifting up emerging talent in that way. And I think that another thing that L&D people in particular can do is just continue to advertise your interest in getting people from non-traditional backgrounds. You read a lot now about
Mm,
how it needs to be about skills and not credentials, and I really believe that.
yes.
One of the things that as a small business, it's really important for us is that we not just say we only want people who've worked at other public relations firms, or we only want people who understand how to talk to media. It's great if you come in with that experience, but we have people who work for us who have wonderful transferable skills throughout their career, and now they're doing things at a high level that they never thought they could do. So I think
Yeah.
even for a small company like ours, a micro company like ours, we show what can be done at a large company if you expand your thinking and sort of open the aperture and really let different kinds of talent shine through. And that's part and parcel of what comes with DE&I.
Yeah, and that I think that expansion phrase can be used in a lot of ways, because I think, one thing that I was going to ask a little bit later on is, for learning professionals, DEI practitioners, what are some of the things that you can do to, whether it's defend programs or continue to promote programs in kind of a different thought environment or headspace around this. One of them seems to be just expanding what you think of as DE&I. These are good. These are just good ideas. They're not good diversity, equity, inclusion
Right.
initiatives. They're just good initiatives, and I think that's something that broader L&D is really focusing on a lot right now. Is this shift on business results and business initiatives? Aligning learning with the business.
Yes.
And I think that's probably part of this whole discussion is just like, as long as you need to be talking about what's the right thing and the good thing for the business, and it's going to be creating a more diverse, equal, and inclusive culture. Like that's just what's going to happen.
And that's right, because it's the right thing to do, because just look at the trends. The workforce is diversifying. We know that the workforce is diversifying. That's a fact. One of the facts that we also see across so many companies, unfortunately too many companies, is that at the senior management or leadership ranks, that's where it's not so diverse. And that's
Yeah.
still a hill that needs to be climbed. And I think many companies are trying to have put in place programs that structurally get at that problems, that we need to understand the special considerations. And this was what they are. We need to understand the special considerations and issues confronted by people of difference as they try to ascend into management and senior management ranks. We still have that hill to climb. I was just reading a trend report, that said that one of the trends is we'll need to basically account for people's lack of social skills, right? Because of what we've just gone through with the pandemic, and they
Mm.
just don't know how to relate to people from a social skills standpoint. So if we're willing to make those accommodations, why can't we make accommodations for diversity in so many ways?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. That's totally
Yeah.
right. So I imagine from your perspective, you're talking to a lot of the C-suite, or at least the higher level
Yep.
folks, and getting, as they're choosing whether or not to bring you in to work with them. What are you, and though you're specifically talking about messaging, what suggestions do you have for practitioners in the business out there to help advance this message in a way that's going to resonate with higher level leadership?
Yeah.
The episode before this one got released was a sales episode where we had somebody who specialized in sales, and the whole discussion was about, how do you have to talk differently in some ways, or they care, the front line cares
Uh-oh.
about different things than the managers
Hello.
and the directors than the executive level, and it's about tailoring your message. When it comes to the discussions that you have around this, what messaging do you see as really effective?
I think one key message is effective, Matt, and that is future proof your company from talent drain. Talented
Mm,
people, and like I said, talent comes in every package, will understand when they are at a company that does not sort of walk the talk when it comes to creating a safe place where I can feel comfortable expressing my unique, values and opinions. They'll see that. They'll be able to see right through the lip service and go someplace else. And it's well documented, and you and your listeners know far better than I do how much you lose when you have to lose an employee and then pay to
yeah,
onboard a new employee. I know that from the standpoint of even a small business. So why
yeah.
wouldn't you want to future proof your company against talent drains and against talented people leaving? So I think, to me, when it comes to structuring effective training and development programs, they need to be structured and presented in a way that recognizes difference, in a way that recognizes inclusion, in a way that recognizes that different is not deficient. Right? We may
Mm-hmm.
process information differently, we may see the world differently, but that does not make me deficient relative to anybody else. So all of these things, I like to say that D&I it really stands for diligence and intentionality. That to me is really what it means,
Mm,
right? So if you're going to be diligent in the
love
face of
that.
these headwinds, if you're going to be intentional in the face of these headwinds, we don't know what's coming next. We know the college admissions have been impacted, unfortunately. And that gets into a pipeline issue. I'll talk about that in a second. But
Yeah,
if you're going to be serious about keeping the best people in a constantly diversifying world, then you shouldn't be too shaken by what the Supreme Court has done. We'll see what the future holds. But
yeah.
one thing I mentioned a second ago is that um, this decision could really impact the pipeline. I sit here
Hmm.
as an African American man. I co-own a business with an African American woman who's my wife, and we both went to Northwestern University. Um, we went to school, in the late '80s, and so things were, much better than they were 30 years ago when Black folks couldn't even live on campus. Not very long ago, but we're proud. We're even what's going on with the athletic department right now. We're proud alumni of Northwestern University. We're proud. We know people who proudly went to Ivy League schools, and just my son and daughters went to great SEC schools, and we know that they are able to claim proud membership in those alumni groups because they were, they had special attention paid to their needs. Everybody should have, access to those schools. We have to acknowledge the historical and systemic barriers that have prevented talent of all packages and colors from reaching admission into Ivy League schools, or reaching the senior management levels at ExxonMobil or PepsiCo, whatever the case may be. So we still have these issues to confront, and they're structural and they're systemic, and what we cannot be deterred by one Supreme Court ruling, because again, we have to be, as I said, uh, diligent and intentional.
Yeah, and kind of on that point, one, I think even if no matter what you think about this decision, what seems to be a good thing coming out of the decision is it's already started. I think I've seen at least one lawsuit targeting legacy admissions,
Yeah. Mhm.
which if you know about college admissions, like that's a big
That's
thing.
right.
that that could be a big game
It could
changer.
be.
But to keep going down this road, like you mentioned, so the pipeline issue, it kind of makes corporate DE&I initiatives all the more important. Then
Yes.
we need to be all the more active of looking for new places of
That's right.
talent, because you can't just automatically say college degree, Ivy
That's
League,
right.
like it's not going to get you the kind of pool that you need to be effective long
Yeah.
term.
That's one of the things that I've always loved, Matt, about working in DE&I work, is that it forces you to just really disrupt your past ways of thinking,
Mm.
right? It really forces you to ask yourself, are my learning and development programs really helpful to the people who are going to be my future employees and my future leaders? Are they really maximizing their experience in my company? Or do I need to break it all up and reinvent what I do from an L&D perspective? Do I need to break up what I do from a recruitment perspective? Like you just said, you can't say, well, this person checks the box, went to Yale, went to Harvard Law, belonged to this secret society, whatever the case may be. You are totally shutting yourself off from all rivers of talent if you just sort of think in those traditional boxes and try to check those boxes. And really, the thing that upsets me most is this mentality of loss. I have to protect something or else I'm going to lose, as opposed to I'm going to open up my arms and gain that much more. That's what we're really talking about here, and smart companies recognize that.
Yeah, and I think it's also that pipeline of, I always think about it as the pipeline of ideas,
Yep.
right? It's just like our ideas come from our experiences. Full stop. Like there's nowhere else for them to come from. And so if everyone in your workforce has the same experiences, they're going to have the same ideas, right? And the
That's
only
right.
way you can branch out is by getting different experiences, and that can be by hiring different races, different genders, different sexualities, different socioeconomic statuses. The range of what it means to be diverse is diverse.
That's right.
So I think there's always a new way to look at this, which is, I think, what makes it so interesting, but also challenging.
It is a challenge, and part of the challenge is obviously we'll have to keep an eye on what happens now that this ruling has come down. We'll have to keep a close eye on things. But I don't think that means we go catatonic. I don't think that means that that smart companies will retrench into this position of, no, let's defend ourselves against assault. I say go on the offense. Really continue on your path of attracting people who will allow you to capitalize on markets of the future and talents of the future. And if you look at why do companies cut costs? Why do companies make investments in other companies? Because they want to grow. So at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is growing through D and I, not sort of holding back our growth.
I love that. So if I was to kind of think about this discussion and like the main takeaways, the two main points that I have so far are: one, it's a single decision
Right.
in an isolated situation. Let's not overinflate what it means,
Right.
right? It has a very specific meaning. So that's the one. That's
With,
one
like you
case.
said, with any Supreme Court decision, that's how you have to treat
Exactly.
each one. Right.
Exactly, with any Supreme Court decision. And then the second thing is if there is a message or a way to act differently, it's just to continue to focus DE&I on, like you said, connecting your efforts to growth,
Yes.
to impact, to things that you're able to accomplish through it,
Yes.
not compliance. Because not only is that not necessarily as helpful in the long run, it's just not what you want to be focusing on at this
I
point.
don't think so. I think it's a good way to drive your talent away. And at a time when no company should be trying to push people away. You should be trying to retain and grow the very best and attract the very best. And like I said, employees will see right through, a toxic culture, and they'll go someplace else. They simply will just go
Absolutely.
someplace else. I mean, it all sizes. Companies see that every day. So, why would you obsolete yourself and shut yourself off from talent as opposed to really saying, no, we're committed to this and we want you here. We want you to grow here. And that's, to me, those,
Absolutely.
again, from a communication standpoint, those are some of the key messages. If I were putting together a message house, as we like to call it here at Rudd Resources, that would be the key message, as we want you here and we are committed to your growth here.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, this has been awesome. David, anything that we haven't covered? I know you spent some time preparing for this conversation. Any key things that you think people need to know before we close out?
Just really, as I said, Matt, just continue to be diligent and be intentional. We still have challenges at that senior leadership level, so continue to be committed in those spaces. Continue to be committed to open recruitment, and just recognize that your employees are not dumb. They've got options in this day and age because of shortages.
Mm-hmm.
Every trend
Yep.
that I read talks about labor shortages. So if they're not
Yep.
happy with you, they'll be happy someplace else. So why would you risk it?
Yep, I think that's 100% right. Well, thank you so much for the conversation,
Thank
David.
you.
It's been great. I definitely think we'll talk more soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you liked the discussion, make sure to hit like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. As a reminder, if your team is struggling keeping up with the training development demands of your organization, we want to help. Better Everyday Studios is a full-service instructional design team that can help you with everything from ideation to actual content creation and delivery. Please reach out to us using the link in the episode notes below. Have a great day.